Well, I am here with my sister-in-law, Elizabeth Cannings, Dr. Elizabeth Cannings. She has her earned doctorate degree from Dallas Baptist University and has been a part of my life. I met...
Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary.
Thank you for
So I have to
correcting me
give
on
them
that.
credit, yeah.
So, excuse me, Southwestern Baptist. And, I met you when you were 12 years old when I came to Guyana, South America, and you were so kind to me. Your father was the head of the committee for our crusade, and that's where I met your sister, Lois, who later became my wife. But whenever I came over, why don't you say what you always did?
For some reason, I squeezed fresh oranges for you every time you came over. And I was one of them on your side for Lois when everybody was not.
That shows you a wise person. You had good insight.
Yeah, but I just saw potential in you. I didn't know God was going to use you in such a mighty way, which I'm very encouraged, and had the privilege of working at the Urban Alternative at the church as well.
Well, your passion has been children's ministry. You were on staff for 13 years at the church, even though you volunteered even before and after that for many years. And you joined us in helping to raise our 4 children, 13 grandchildren, and now 2 great-grandchildren, and pretty close to 3 great-grandchildren. So we have a deep debt of gratitude to you for what you've invested in my life, our family's life, and the ministry and the kingdom of God. You are a treasure and an asset to God and to people, and we're very grateful for you. Well, she's here to ask me some Q&As, so some questions and answers, so let's get at it and see what we come up with.
Yeah, but thank you for the opportunity. You know, as Tony says, or Dr. Evans said, that I'm from another country, so the culture is different with this whole dynamic of what's going on in the country with racism and stuff. So everyone comes with a different perspective from however they were raised and influenced. But a question that I think is great is, how do I remain hopeful in such a confusing time?
Well, that's a great question. Everybody's looking for hope, which is expectation about a better future. Hope is looking forward to tomorrow being better than yesterday and today. And throughout the Bible, because we approach all these issues from a Christian worldview, God gives hope, but he gives hope in him. And that means not only the person of God, but the perspective of God. You made a very important point. Everybody comes at this issue from their own perspectives. They wear different eyeglasses because they have different experiences. That's why it's important for us to put on God's glasses. Because if we put on his perspective, then we'll see things clearly. Right now, things are fuzzy. Luke 24, the disciples had lost hope, and Jesus gave them his perspective, and they changed how they were feeling because they were looking at it through different eyes. So as soon as black Christians and white Christians in particular begin to approach this thing from God's perspective and not just their perspective, we can't ignore what's happened to us, so I don't mean that. But I mean filter that through a divine perspective. That's where you get hope from. I'll just say from Jeremiah 29, 11 through 14, he says, I'm going to give you hope, but you got to come and do it my way, and then I'll restore what was broken. We need some restoration based on hope, but that means there's got to be a radical return to God and his perspective about who we are and how we relate to one another.
I was influenced from another country, but how were you influenced coming to Guyana? I know you've mentioned it in Oneness Embrace, how your perspective changed with culture, and what are some things that was your takeaway?
Well, I got, when I went to Guyana, it was predominantly black people that I was around, but it was run by black leadership. And I was exposed to black people who were operating in a different cultural context. And what that reiterated to me was that the issue is not only race, it's also culture. It's how you were raised, it's your worldview. You were greatly influenced by a spiritual worldview from your mom and dad that infiltrated, your whole family, and Lois, my late wife. So I saw the impact of that and how that worked itself out in a cultural context. So it kind of reaffirmed to me that a biblical worldview can be instituted in any culture when that worldview is dominant, in a family or in a place. The problem where we live, in the world we live in today, is that worldview is no longer dominant. We live in a post-Christian culture, so the Christian worldview does not dominate, so now everybody's doing what's right in their own eyes. What I saw when I was there was a consistency of a culture that had been influenced by a Christian worldview that we have begun to lose here. Another thing that I saw when I went to Guyana was black people in leadership on every level. And they were influencing the systems that ran the country. And that was an inspirational thing to see. Black people running a whole nation and dominating in terms of influencing the culture. And that some of the systems that from the British history that I learned that you had now shifted over. And you had just become independent as a country. Yeah. And now that responsibility was handed over and they were taking ownership. Well, that was inspiring to me that they were prepared, equipped, and determined to take responsibility for their country. And that kind of mindset I think we need here, to own our responsibility and maximize it for the context in which we're in.
Yeah, in fact, Lois is more from the British side, because I was probably young, 11, 9 or whatever when they became independent. Guyana we do have a divide in PNC and PPP, which is the
two parties basically.
The Indians, East Indians, and the blacks. So, in case the Guyanese is listening, they'll correct me easily. This is a loaded question that I want to ask. Are you sure you want to let me read it? Okay. I work at the Urban Alternative, as you know, and so folks have been writing in, asking questions with the divide that we have going on in the country today. It's from a white listener, and I wanted to read this one. A lot of people are asking this question. What do my non-white friends want from me? The message I'm receiving is that it is all my fault because I am not a person of color. I am supposed to fix it all because I am not a person of color, but I can't fix it all because it's too much. Can you speak to that?
I think that's a great question, and I know that's a feeling that many white people have, that a weight is being put on them too heavy for them to bear. You can't carry that weight. I can't carry the weight for all black people, and you can't carry the weight for all white people. Mm-hmm. You carry your weight. What am I responsible for? And what can I do to make things better in the sphere of influence that I have? If you are doing right, if you are judging people by the content of their character and not the color of their skin, if you are showing empathy when you see situations that are wrong, if you are treating people right, if you are doing your best, that's all God expects of you, and therefore, that's all you should expect for yourself. Anything else is false guilt. And one of the things you never want to do is walk around with false guilt, because it'll never let you go, and there will always be somebody else who keep that weight on you. So you have to take it off yourself, and the way you do that is by making sure you're right with God in your relationship with others. And if you're right with Him in your relationship with others, you're good to go. And you just keep trying to do better, because that's the best you can do.
But how, if I was raised in a culture that's predominantly white, community, school, not much influence with a person of color, how do I begin? I don't even know where to put my first foot. I've been fed so many different things. How do the scales start to fall off?
Well, first of all, it's build a relationship with somebody who's different than you, who can give you an understanding that you may not have. That's how we learn in all of life. Somebody teaches us. There are books you can read. There are articles you can read. Okay. There are people you can associate with, so that you make this a learning experience. Because when you learn more, you're able to understand more, and you're able to empathize more, and you're able to disseminate, particularly if it's a person who shares your same value system, but who can educate you because they have experiences that you don't have. What a lot of people do is, because they can't see this big solution, they wind up doing nothing. And everybody can do something, starting with one other person that can lead you in a better understanding of the issue so that you can grow and deal with it together.
Sometimes when I try to reach out to people of color, they're defensive as well. And I know you've given me a step to do, but how do I come out of this situation? How do I move forward? Yes, you said to read, educate myself, and understand, and open my eyes to seeing different perspectives. And so, and the reason I'm bringing it up, because I do come from a different perspective. I see things differently coming from another culture, even though I see the real stuff here. They reach out to a person of color, but sometimes their experience might be that they're defensive or antagonistic when they're trying to learn. Because sometimes you can reach the wrong person.
Right. Well, I would say, first of all, especially if you're a Christian, and I'm assuming since they wrote the ministry, they may be a Christian. That's why we wrote the book Oneness Embrace, to give you a tool, a reading tool that you can use to help understand the history, the Bible, because we try to come everything from a biblical worldview, but also dealing with the reality. So that's a tool you can use. The second thing is, you can disarm a person that you're talking to by letting them know, because a lot of African Americans will be suspicious. And so you're right, they can be defensive if they're suspicious. But here's what you can say. You say, I'm here to learn. I'm here to understand, because it's confusing to me, but I want to learn. That changes the atmosphere of the question, rather than coming through, what's wrong with y'all? You know, what's the problem here? So the approach, a humble approach, is most likely the best thing to do to get a humble answer. So the approach, I think, can make a difference.
Well, continue with the questions that people write in asking is, everything right now seems like a quick fix. What are some practical ways to create long-term change? And I know you've talked about it over and over, but tell me again, because I'm trying to take steps.
Okay. Well, I think we have to take steps on a number of levels. So we've talked about your personal level of becoming informed, building relationships. And by the way, I always say racial reconciliation happens through service, not just through information. So getting with a person who's different than you to serve somebody else worse off than you is a great way to get to know each other while you're doing good, because then there's meaning to the relationship and not just information. Then secondly, long-term change happens generationally, and that starts with how we train our children. Because much of these problems have come because the wrong thing has been passed down from parent to child. So exposing your children to people who are different than you, who share your values, where you as families can minister to someone worse off than you. Again, it's the same principle, but now on a family level. But I really make a big deal about the church. Becoming a part of a church that is inclusive, as much as that is possible, because people live in different areas. And even if it's not an integrated church, it has a integrated mentality. That is, it wants to build relationships. It wants to connect. And where it can, it does. And it preaches righteousness and justice, which are two equal emphases in Scripture. One of the problems is justice has been left out of many churches, and that's why you hear the cry for it in the culture today. So being a part of a community of families that want to build bridges And then one of the things we can do is speak up when we see injustice occurring. We speak up about other sins. Well, injustice based on skin color is a sin, and we need to treat it like a sin. So you may not be a racist, but you may not be an anti-racist, where you speak up when there's something obviously wrong. And so when you do a little here and a little there, and enough people do it, you get enough people doing it, like enough people protesting brings attention. Well, enough good righteous people doing righteous acts that make a difference cross-racially and cross-culturally begins to expand the healing process. And when enough people get healed, it becomes generational. And when it becomes generational, it becomes long-term.
I just have one more question. People of color, because you mentioned anti-racism and racism, people of color sometimes react when a person, initial response when you're talking to them, I'm not racist. Mm-hmm. How do we change even that conversational piece? Because in a way, it brings up the other person of being defensive again. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, the problem could be on the accuser, because the person could be implying or saying a person is racist, and they're going to defend them. So if you tell me I stole and I knew I didn't steal, then I'm going to react to that, okay? So the issue is, this person may be hurting, this person may be wounded. So when they come like that, you can literally agree with them about their concern about racism. Well, that's not how I feel, but I agree with you, if their point is valid, that there is racism that needs to be addressed. So you can be empathetic while denying at the same time that that's where your heart is. And then on top of that, when a person puts you in that situation where, because a lot of time they call this microaggression, where you just kind of write off things that are serious to one person, and you're not taking it seriously as they mean it, then you need to say that, not only am I not racist, but I want to do everything I can to dismantle racism wherever I see it. Because now you just joined them in the concern. So where you can partner with a person in their concern, and where you can deny culpability because it's not true of you, but be empathetic at the same time, at least takes the temperature down some, depending on where that person is coming from.
Well, I said one last, but the conversation that goes that people of color would say that I can't be a racist because, how does that go again?
I don't have power. And to have racism, you have power, okay? That's a power, influence, position, all give strength to racism, because then you're in a position to deny somebody something. But that's not the full understanding of racism. Racism can also be a visual or verbal communication. For example, there was a picture of a man mocking what happened to George Floyd by kneeling on his friend's neck. Now, he didn't have power, he didn't have influence, he had position, but he visually communicated his racism. So if I say I hate all white people, then I am communicating a racist attitude, even though I'm not exercising any influence over them. So in that way, a person of color can be a racist simply by communicating a hatred of another person based on skin color.
Thank you. Appreciate it.